Good afternoon, everyone. I am Prabhat Kumar. I head the Public Finance Management team at Janaagraha. We heard about need for financial resources for cities. In a federal country like ours, where revenue mobilizing power is not commensurate with expenditure obligation, the systems for grant transfers becomes inevitable. Given this, the fiscal decentralization, which is a crucial enabler for better municipal performance, service delivery, and accountability, becomes important. However, it remains a nascent, incomplete, and dormant reform agenda across the states. There are two pillars for fiscal decentralization. One is devolving of own revenue powers, and the second one would be intergovernmental fiscal transfer or grants. These two are very important agendas and really big topics to discuss. In this session, we will be focusing on the second one, intergovernmental transfers or grants. Within that as well, there are the three major sources would be Central Finance Commission grants, State Finance Commission grants, as well as scheme grants. Today, we are going to focus more on State Finance Commission, which is one of the biggest source of the grants within these three sources. We know, and it was discussed during the panel as well, grants, when they are predictable, timely, and are flowing through certain formulas, becomes important for financial sustainability of ULBs. While central finance commissions have been credible, the state finance commissions, barring few states, have seen issues. And the issues can be continuity in the formation, the issues can be delay in tabling the recommendation, or even the recommendation, even after getting accepted, being implemented. We have excellent panel today. I don't need to introduce the panel. We have Mr. Dr. Ashok Lahiri, who is MLA in West Bengal and also has been member of 15th Finance Commission. We have Mr. S.M. Vijayanand, IAS, retired IAS, who has been chairperson of 6th State Finance Commission, as well as former Chief Secretary, Kerala. We have Mr. S. Krishnan, Secretary, MIT, Government of India, and he has been the chairperson of 5th State Finance Commission, Tamil Nadu. And we two panelists would be repeating, Mr. Vikas Gupta and Mr. T.K. Sreedevi. The objective of this panel would be to discuss the current limitations of SFCs and ideas to strengthen SFCs, and also look at the role that SFCs can play, not just on the grant transfer, but also on how can we improve the governance of the local bodies, as well as how can SFCs push the limit on improvement in service delivery. With that, and the panel will be moderated by Mr. Srinivasan Kesavan, who has been former Deputy CAG to Government of India. With that, I invite the panel here and invite the panelists on the dais.
Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to have a very distinguished panel, which makes my job simple. I don't have to do much other than to have the received wisdom of the people here. I would just try to introduce the topic. In a way, I mean, like we've all heard that India lives in villages, a shibboleth which probably people of my generation grew up with, which is not really true. The 2011 census might have put it at 31%, but if you take any of the definitions of the UN or other definitions going around, we would have probably crossed or come close to a majority. And there are certain states, the state I come from, Tamil Nadu, it's clearly more than 50% easily. And I heard the same thing about Telangana. So urban centers and urban governance is increasingly important. Then comes the question of fiscal decentralization. Decentralization as a virtue is well known. We don't have to debate. after we have settled on that decentralization is good for governance. With that being the case, fiscal decentralization is now the topic, and fiscal decentralization vis-a-vis the third tier is always a challenge. In between the states and the center, it's a well-contested space between almost equals. I wouldn't say that, but the states can put up a good fight and probably represent finance commissions and get their due. But between the states and the third tier, which got formed pretty much later with the 73rd and 74th Amendment, it is not a battle between equals. And therefore, it is not even a contested area. There has been problems in, though you've got the state finance commissions, you can argue all the time about whether the words used may, shall, and what is revenue, what is shared, and does anybody certify it, do they think that it is distributed? We have all kinds of issues when it comes to the money flowing into third tier. If money is not the only problem, what about devolution of powers? 18 functions, have they been devolved? If not, are they waiting for the state capacity to develop in the third tier for devolution? Or should devolution come first and this thing will follow? These are all hard questions of public policy. To debate that, we have a brilliant panel, and we cannot do better than to start with Dr. Lahiri, and then we'll share his thoughts, and then we'll take it from there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. When I was invited to this conclave, I felt immensely grateful to Srikant and the organizers, but they told me I don't have to prepare anything. I'm just coming for a free lunch. I'll hear these distinguished people, but now I find that I have to speak. You have seen me in many incarnations, but now for the last 2.5 years, I'm the member of the Legislative Assembly of West Bengal from a semi-rural, rural-urban, all constituencies I think are now semi-urban, semi-rural. So I'll speak from my heart, not from my head so much. So the first issue I must tell you is that I'm a great admirer of our founding fathers. We often forget that many of the countries with the ethno-linguistic diversity as we have not survived. The Soviet Union, Pakistan, Yugoslavia, there are many, but we have survived. And I think it's because of our decentralization. Not only decentralization, it's devolution. The difference between decentralization and devolution is constitutionally mandated. Whereas decentralization you can have even in the United Kingdom, where it is done at the whims and fancies of the leaders. So what are my takes from this? Now this discussion today is about urban local bodies. It's not about local bodies. So rural has been left out. And I think given Janaagraha's interests, it's appropriate. And not only that, I think it's appropriate because if there is one problem in India that I have come to realize, after having lived mostly in large cities, I grew up in Calcutta, then I came to Delhi to study and then spent a long number of years here, then Washington, D.C., England, Metro Manila. Now I have come face to face with Bharat, and that's in Balurghat in Dokhin Dinajpur district. Now, urbanization, I think, is very important. Urbanization is going to take place, no matter what you do. But the question is whether it's going to be planned urbanization or not. The census has told us that peri-urban areas are growing. So India is going to urbanize. The question is whether we're going to urbanize in a planned way or not. Second, the political reality. The political reality is as soon as you talk about devolution of funds, people will talk about what about rural areas. The reason is that since unplanned urbanization is taking place, you will not know where Gurgaon municipalities ends and Panchayat starts. You go to Balurghat, you will not find where Balurghat municipality ends and the Panchayat starts. So delimitation has not been done. Planned urbanization, one of my panelists, she said that most of the states have urban plans. I haven't found that in my state. And master plans are not there. I think one of my takes is define the urban areas in a big way. Because one of the states, I won't name it, I'm in touch with, since I was in the government, I'm in touch with many of the municipal bosses. And they tell me that what they have done for property tax, in the areas where new buildings are coming up, it's much easier to impose property taxes. But in my old house, which is 150 years old or 50 years old, if you come and tell me that you're going to revise property taxes, it's going to be very difficult. So political realities, urban voting power, properly defined, is inadequate. Because you're not going to talk about only reality today, you're going to talk about the reality tomorrow. The structure of decentralization is the other question. As you know, decentralization has been defined, the states have been given some powers, and they will devolve to the local bodies. Now, I again feel that this is right. This creates a lot of problem. The 29 functions that are supposed to be devolved, you find a lot of diversity. Some states have done it, some states haven't. So, but the fact is that you cannot fight with the alligator when you're in the river. So if the center devolves and doesn't take the state along, it cannot be implemented. The fourth take is that you can always have a demand-led or a supply-led reform. Many of the reforms in India was well ahead of our times. And mind you, you may have different opinion. Now, in the last panel it was discussed, I have come to believe more and more that there is a symbiosis between the people and the political leaders. Anthony Down's famous statement that politicians do not win elections to formulate policies. They formulate policies to win elections. But at the same time, there are leaders, they're called statesmen, who do things ahead of their times. The people may not want it. So you're slightly paternalistic. If you take a referendum, people may say, no, this will not work. But the statesman or the stateswoman foresees it and says, we'll do it. And in a few years' time, when it delivers the results, they win the election. Now I come to the nitty-gritties. The decentralization has got 3 Fs, as you know: funds, functions, and functionaries. Now here, there is a lot of diversity. I was looking at a number, I was telling Mr. Vijayanand, my old friend, that I was quite impressed by the southern states. If you look at the per capita devolution of funds, from the union, it's more or less the same because it's constrained by all sorts of equity issues. But across states, when you find the state finance commissions devolving and the state governments actually putting the action taken report in the assemblies, a lot of diversity. Per capita devolution, and I must congratulate my friends from the south, the southern states have done much better. The per capita devolution is much more. The east is backward. The west is also catching up. The northern states are catching up, but very slow. Similarly, functions. Functions, for example, Kerala has devolved a lot of functions. Some others haven't. And then there is a political reality. So you see politicians, if the mayor of the municipality or the chairman of the municipal board is going to take all the credit, what do I do as an MLA? What credit do I what does the ruling party at the capital or in the state take credit for? So devolution of funds and functions and also functionaries. It's a lot of power. And here, I think we need to do something about the incentive structure. And here, politics is going to play a major role. What role is it going to play? What I find in the states where you have one party getting a major mandate in the state, they have less difficulties in devolving powers to the local bodies, because the municipal commissioner is my man or my woman from my same party, so I can claim credit. But if it belongs to the opposition, then I have difficulties. Now, the functions, I think we need to do a lot of thinking on that. After having visited many primary health centers, primary schools, where the cadre is appointed, transferred, paid from the state capital, there is not proper alignment of interests. I'm waiting to hear from the four, one retired and three serving bureaucrats who have served as district magistrates and in various capacities. What do they think? Now, I think there is some risk of giving it to the Gram Panchayat. Because Gram Panchayat, then you don't know whether as the Panchayat chief, I'll appoint my cousin or my wife as the teacher. But what about the block level? What about the district level? I mean, I come across teachers whom I ask, you're teaching in this school, where do you live? She lives 45 kilometers away. So by the time she comes in the morning, she's tired. 45 kilometers, and she doesn't have a four-wheeler. So I think when it comes to functionaries, one of the things that we need to talk about, one of the things that we need to discuss, again, it cannot be done from the union level. It cannot be done from Delhi. But good sense should prevail. And I think politicians are going to get some reward if they can improve the quality of education service, primary education and health service, primary health service at the ground level. Now, this cannot be done unless functionaries improve. And the quality of education, you know from the Pratham, wherever I go, Pratham surveys that it's not up to the mark. That's why private educational institutions are getting higher and higher number of students. And we find nightmarish reports, and whenever I go to a village, I catch hold of young boys and girls and ask them, multiply 7 and 5. I'm surprised that many of them can, because I'm always horrified at the prospect that they may not be able to do that in class 7 or class 8. And so I'll stop here by saying funds, functions and functionaries, we need to think very carefully about how to decentralize so that the quality of service and quality of the quality of utilization of funds improves. And also, what can you do about State Finance Commission? There are some State Finance Commission former chairmen sitting here, but I have known states in my other incarnation where State Finance Commission chairmen are some minor functionaries, retired people who have been appointed. State Finance Commission is an extremely important constitutional body. And you look at the diversity of states, some have gone up to only the 4th State Finance Commission. Some states have, like Kerala, have done much better. Why doesn't it take place? You may say that the people don't bother. There's no revolt. But it has to be supply-led. Fiscal decentralization, to some extent, have to be done at the initiative of the leaders, because they will have to take the risk. They will have to say, we'll appoint a proper State Finance Commission with a proper chairman who may tell me things which I don't like. I'll fight with him or her, and we'll get the right report, what needs to be done. I'll stop there, and thank you.
Thank you. So we get the message very clearly that forms, functions and functionaries have to move together. It's almost a sense that it's a reform ahead of its time, so it's still work in progress. And let's hear Mr. Vijayanand now.
Thank you. I'll give my perspective. I was member of the 2nd and 4th State Finance Commissions of Kerala, chairman of the 6th, and I processed the 1st, 3rd and 5th. So it's an unbeatable experience in civil service, actually delving into depth in 6 finance companies. That apart, adding to Dr. Lahiri's 3 Fs, I have 3 more Fs. One is called framework. You need a very rigorous fiscal or whatever framework. Next would be freedoms. Who decides? What freedom do you have? In the earlier meeting, I was shocked at the lack of freedom in local governments. And then the facilitation. Government should not direct. You should facilitate. So, having said that, the political economy of SFCs. Who is to be blamed for SFCs not being constituted? Is it the politician? I don't think so. The bureaucrat has not approached the politician on time or ahead of time that this needs to be constituted. It's a constitutional necessity. So constitution, you can't blame the politician. Then there's a culture. By the time the Finance Commission started, it was 93, 30 years ago, 40 years into independence. So in those days after independence, we respected the constitution. Probably now we are more interested in gaming the constitution. Even a low-level official tries to game the constitution. So it's a change of culture. It's also there. And multiple stakeholders. Finance department, rural development department, urban development department, state center. So you have too much of convergence issues. Then unfortunately, there are former finance secretaries, present finance secretaries here. I have also been finance secretary for some time. What is the interest of finance department in SFC? Very unlikely. What is the incentive? What is the attitude? And what is the knowledge and expertise in a local government matter? Maybe the IAS officer would have worked earlier, but nobody in finance department knows anything about this. So the finance department constitutes, sets the TOR, guides it, and implements. It's a very, very strange situation. So they are some of the big kind of challenges in the political economy part of it. Then of course, the states is too early to have precedents and culture. I mean, most of us, as Sir would say, Finance Commission has glorious tradition. So you go back to the first Finance Commission and then come on. But there's no such thing there. And no institution to seek help. That's a tragic thing. In the 1990s, I know the first finance commissions of most states went to NARD. At the time it was NARD and sought help. There was an SFC cell there. Now they are trying to revive it. It's no longer there. And no pressure from anybody. There's no pay commission. So there's nobody interested. And the Central Election Commission has a relationship with the state election commissions because they are permanent bodies. Since Union Finance Commission and State Finance Commissions are not permanent bodies, there is no relationship. And very importantly, there is no legislative oversight. Though it's all placed in the assembly, there's no formal legislative oversight of Finance Commission recommendations being acted on. Now what can be done in this rather bleak scenario? Some general advices, specifics, because each state has a specific. One I would request, NIPFB is here, has done a very good study, empirical study on several Finance Commission reports. It's the best so far available. I think that could be expanded to cover all the Finance Commission reports, and you can trace the history, is there a change, and lateral differences, and bring about the best practices in each thing, right from TOR, composition, methodology, support systems, acting on it, processes, and action taken, implemented, not implemented, the whole lot. It's a huge, big, complex thing, but easy to analyze. I think NIPFP can take it further. Then our next Finance Commission, we should all collectively give a memorandum for whatever is worth to the 16th Finance Commission, that they should interact with the live state Finance Commissions. And they can even call the previous Finance Commissions and hold a discussion when they go to the states. And also probably they can prepare a model framework. I think a template was prepared earlier. And there should be a chapter on state finance commissions as part of the local government thing. Now they, of course, give a very general thing. And on the template, the model finance commission, Ministry of Panchayat Raj did it about 10 years back. We can dust it and probably recirculate it with a joint support. And I think there's time for a study, which again NIPFP alone can do, or Janaagraha can also do, status of urban finance. We don't know what tax, which is levied by whom, what is the per capita, receipts, we just don't know. It's very, very important. And SFC capacity building, when I was Secretary Panchayat Raj in Delhi, great reputation I call the SFCs. But some of them are minister's rank. So I thought, how can a bureaucrat call them? But all of them, you will not believe it, said that we want such meetings. And we want such discussions across finance commissions. So somebody, best is an academic institution. I understand CAG is going to set up an international center for local governments. Now he's made it local governments in Rajkot. I think that is fascinating possibilities of looking into this from a neutral standpoint. Then I would strongly recommend, all of us here sitting should come together. I'm willing to provide my knowledge, whatever is worth pro bono. Probably NIPFA could lead it. A manual for guiding finance commissions on the technical professional aspects, like what are the standard spending needs of local governments, and what is the revenue raising capacity. So a simple formula, but very difficult to determine. Then which are the available data, and how do you interpret data? What kind of formula? So all those things are technical matters. I know many state finance commissions are struggling. How to do this looks very simple. And they waste a lot of time on it. That's the worst part. Not that they cannot find out. Then of course all this we are able to do. The other thing is the managerial part. How do you manage a finance commission? What power should be there? I think finance commission should have full autonomy. They will decide which study they should take. Now if you want a study, it goes back to the finance department. It may never come back. So these kind of things are very, very important. A grant project, which I want to suggest, which only probably a Union Finance Commission grant. What is the possible fiscal domain of local governments, rural and urban, in the Indian context? We have no idea. We're still going with the British tradition of property tax, maybe a little bit of entertainment tax and all that. There is a possible, needs to be carved out, at least for discussion. They have to be done, and nothing more, except that naming and shaming. These are the states which are having 4th Finance Commission. Somebody should write about it. These are the states which have never implemented a Finance Commission, though they have accepted it. I think it needs to come out into the public domain. I know none of you will have the appetite for that, but I think this is a right cause for a public interest litigation. Yes, it's a constitutional mandate. You can't play with it. I think somebody or some group should go. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think the message which came loud and clear is capacity building for the State Finance Commission and some kind of structural and institutional connect with the Central Finance Commission, and probably an angst about not respecting the constitutional mandate of the State Finance Commission and the subsequent transfers. And we also had 3 more Fs. I'm just worried that we don't add a F of failure on State Finance Commissions. Having said it, now let's go to Krishnan, who's been the head of State Finance Commission, also a Finance Secretary, processing it to find out his viewpoints.
Thank you very much, Srini. When I heard Mr. Vijayanand speak, I was just reminded of 2 little anecdotes which may be very relevant in the way that finance commissions are treated by different states and how, the composition of the finance commission is perceived. In 1994, right after the 73rd and 74th amendments were mandated, the government of Tamil Nadu had to appoint its first finance commission. And he was mentioning that, bureaucrats should hasten this process. And I was a young civil servant in those days. I was deputy secretary. I was a budget officer of the state. And we suddenly woke up that the provision in the constitution said that 1 year from the date on which the act came into force, the Constitution Amendment Act came into force, the state shall appoint a finance commission. And those were the days when the then government of Tamil Nadu, like the now government of Tamil Nadu, was at loggerheads with its governor. So suddenly we woke up and said, good Lord, what happens if the governor says tomorrow that the constitutional machinery of the state is broken down? And I was dispatched with the file constituting the State Finance Commission. I caught a flight in dramatic fashion. The governor was sitting in Kodaikanal in the state guest house. So I caught a flight in dramatic fashion. They kept the doors open as I dashed into the flight with the file and went all the way to Kodaikanal in the middle of the night and got the file signed. And next day came back saying, we have saved the government. So I guess, civil servants probably in other states, they just got away. I only wish we could have been that relaxed at that point and let matters drift. And the second thing that Mr. Vijayanand would probably remember, that when you were Secretary of Panchayati Raj in the Government of India, you had a meeting, you had a conference of the State Finance Commissions, and at that point, I was the chairman of the 5th State Finance Commission. Since the 6th has been constituted, and that's also submitted its report. And we met, I think it was in India Habitat Center, and in the conference, everyone got after me saying, how can a serving civil servant be chairman of a finance commission? You're going to be completely biased in favor of the government. But in the event, I think one thing that bureaucrats do sometimes a little better than politicians is the art of the possible. So at least you can get things done in a way that actually works for what would be accepted as a report and would get implemented. And I think the record of some states, including Kerala and Tamil Nadu, that way has been fairly good in terms of actually formulating reports and getting it done. Everyone keeps talking about finances. Dr. Lahiri recognized that we do better. Let me just address 2 or 3 points. First, let me address and not join issue with Dr. Lahiri, but make a small point at his expense insofar as the role of the Union Finance Commission is with reference to state finance commissions. Dr. Lahiri was an illustrious member of the 15th Finance Commission. But frankly, and there have been many people, including in the seminar, in the conference that Mr. Vijayanand had hosted, who are all for finance commissions actually imposing, the Union Finance Commissions imposing a lot of conditions on states to ensure that devolution takes place and so on. And they were very cut up at that time with the 14th Finance Commission's report, which I think imbued with Dr. Y.V. Reddy's philosophy, believed that the center was no authority to talk to the states on this, and that probably leads to this feeling that the center and the states are more equally placed. At least he perceived his role as being equidistant from the center and the states, and therefore his recommendation or conditions on release of the Central Finance Commission grants to states was very, very limited. That you should have conducted, there should have been duly constituted bodies, and that the accounts of the previous year ought to have been submitted. I think these were the only 2 conditions, and I think very fairly so. I think unless you trust one level below you, you can't expect the level below that to trust the level further levels. I think you can't have a union government which places lots of restrictions and then expects states to trust local bodies. I think in that sense, that approach, which was reversed, unfortunately, by the 15th Finance Commission, was probably a significant approach, and which gave, I think, many state finance commissions the room to do a lot more. So that is one point I want to make there. The second thing that we need to be very conscious of is in figuring out, what is the extent of devolution and the manner in which it works. All 3 factors are relevant: funds, functions, and functionaries. In some senses, Tamil Nadu's experience is that we have caught ourselves in a bit of a bind because somebody suddenly decided, our finance commission, first state finance commission, came straight after the Dr. Rangarajan's 12th finance commission, which was the first one to recommend this universal devolution. They recommended 28% of the union's receipts to be devolved to states, and that suddenly became fashionable. And so promptly our people started recommending a percentage of the revenue of the state to be devolved on states, on the local bodies, which is perfectly in order. Only thing is then you are devolving a larger and larger sum, and in a state like Tamil Nadu you have an interesting scenario where fewer functions and fewer functionaries are devolved. So which then means a very substantial amount of money goes, almost 10% and up, from the center, from the state's overall tax kitty, but the number of functions that you have actually devolved is limited. And more than that, functionaries have all been what is called provincialized. They've all been taken. The point that Dr. Lahiri was making, that they are recruited and paid by the state government. Now, this is something that many employees preferred at that point in time. And I recall, as the chair of the Fifth Finance Commission, when we asked a number of local body heads whether they would prefer to take employees back under their control, many of them were against it. They didn't want this responsibility of paying salaries and this headache of paying salaries and everything else. The preference always was to have more money that they could spend on capital works, which are necessary undoubtedly, but then I think you would also find that if there are other kinds of priorities misplaced, you can get into the same issues. And the other element, and in fact, there was a very interesting paper which was presented to us by IFMR, by a scholar in IFMR at that point, which made this point that if you're getting too much by way of grant, or if you're getting too much by way of devolution, then your incentive to raise revenues on your own are really constrained and limited. So there is this element of how do you keep the incentives for raising more revenues locally? How do you keep that intact, and how do you enable that? We found, for instance, across the world, and this is something which comes out of one of the reports which NIPFP had prepared for the 14th Finance Commission, the Union Finance Commission. They've analyzed what has happened with property tax across the world. And roughly in most leading countries and elsewhere, property tax constitutes about 2% of GDP. It's about 2% of GDP. And we found that in India, there were some states which were almost doing about 0.5% and so on. And some states, and Tamil Nadu at that point was just doing about 0.12% or 0.13%. So clearly there was scope. I mean, if you present it as 0.12% going up to 0.6%, it seems like, okay, not too bad. But when you say that it's going to be a five-fold jump, it is quite significant. And this is one issue. So how do you actually incentivize? So we tried to actually introduce an element which said that if you actually do collect, if you do levy and collect to this extent, then there would be an incentive pot out of the Finance Commission, State Finance Commission devolution, which would enable you to get there. A similar situation exists with rural local bodies as well. The other big issue is how do you decide, and this is an urban agenda conference, so I think this is an important and relevant issue here. How do you decide the breakup between rural and urban distribution? And there's always this problem of what do you do with quasi-towns, or what are called census towns? People who live in those border areas and who are not quite urban. So that is always, a definitional issue. So in fact, we brought in a new sort of categorization of village panchayats which border towns and which have a higher density of population. How do you address their requirements within the rural allocation? And the theory generally, or the belief, political belief generally, is urban local bodies can raise more money, urban governments can raise more money by way of taxation, and rural taxation capacity is limited. In the process, more money goes to rural areas than to urban areas. In a state like Tamil Nadu, where the rural-urban population breakup is virtually the same, it's about 50-50, probably tending more towards urban now, a little more than 50. The general devolution used to be 58% to rural local bodies and 42% to urban local bodies. Idea being that rural bodies can possibly raise more of their money. To shift this needle a little bit, at least towards 50-50 or 56-44, is often a huge political battle and not easy to do, but something which needs to be done. Because otherwise what you have is literally unnecessary works being taken up in rural areas, a phenomenon that at least I have anecdotally seen even at first glance, or even personally is something that I have experienced. The second thing is that many urban bodies in particular, in urban areas, many services are rendered by single purpose agencies, water supply boards, urban upgradation or slum agencies, metropolitan development authorities and so on. Now, in many states, these bodies render some services which ought to be rendered or which would traditionally be municipal services. We can always argue whether it should be rendered by a single purpose agency or whether it should be rendered by the urban local body itself. That is a point of argument and that has to be decided. But if you do have bodies of this nature, how do you ensure that they are also adequately funded in terms of the limited municipal services that they provide? I think that's something which is crucial. Then the last thing, which is always a big headache and always a problem, is the basis of devolution. This whole notion of how do you do formula. Population is the easiest because that clearly reflects need and sometimes is the one thing on which you have a fairly adequate measure. But sometimes there are historic service levels, there are other concerns which need to be addressed, and want of data or the lack of data is a critical element. We found an interesting piece of data which perhaps is no longer now available, but at that time when we did it, we found an interesting piece of data which was about the marginal per capita consumption expenditure. If you look at a state like Tamil Nadu, you have district GDP estimates which are fairly robust, but probably do not reflect the true level of income in the district. And you would find that the difference between the highest state with the highest per capita district GDP and the lowest per capita district GDP would be a ratio of about 4.5 or 5:1. That is because of where industries are located, how income is accounted for. But luckily, we had the data from the then NSSO survey, round of survey, plus the state sample, which we could pool and make it relevant at the district level. And we found that when you compared the highest to the lowest in terms of marginal per capita consumption expenditure, you found that the ratio was much closer. It was just 1:2.5 or so, which basically reflected where the income was accruing and actually being spent. And that we used as a proxy to represent some kind of backwardness at a district level and tried to apply it to both urban and rural local bodies within the districts to see that they got a little more money on the indicator of backwardness. But what I'm trying to say is that today, you probably won't get that marginal per capita consumption expenditure data anymore. But availability of data and availability of basis for differentiation between different kinds of local areas within a state sometimes is much more of a challenge than it is at the national level. So having mentioned some of these general issues, let me close here and probably come back later if there is any specific question to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Krishnan. You set the tone by giving the practical issues and how SFC functions and what are the problems which an SFC faces. Sometimes only in India it can happen, probably the land of Advaita. If you have to centralize, the Central Finance Commission has to be prescriptive to tell the state what to do with its third tier. I do not know which direction are we going. We can go in two directions simultaneously. But having said that, there has to be somebody who has to play the umpire to get the game going. So whether you self-regulate or you get Central Finance Commission to have conditionalities and the state to do. And there are some other debates which never end, like what is the basis of devolution, whether it's Central Finance Commission looking at population, which has stirred up a great debate now, or whether it's a State Finance Commission which has to look at population of those places. Those debates do not change. But within the context of the debate, the point is very clear that we need alignment of functions, functionaries, and then the funds. One cannot be at the cost of other, and importantly, it should not be at the cost of incentivizing people to have their own revenue or let them only live on devolutions. That is also a point which came through, and now I think Mr. Vikas Gupta will have his own experiences from Haryana, which on similar lines. And from a user's perspective, as a person who is receiving those devolutions, he might have some things to say about SFC.
Thank you, Kesavan. I will like to start at a personal note. It's a matter of great pride and honor for me that I am sharing this stage with my guru, Mr. S. Krishnan. He's the one who taught me the nuances of the civil administration, civil services, and intricacies of the public administration. And I owe a lot to him, whatever I have able to do in my last 20 years was like initiated by Krishnan sir. Thank you very much, sir. I worked as a secretary of the 6th State Finance Commission of Haryana, and as earlier said that the bureaucrats, like sir was the chairman, I was the secretary, which is a practice generally with the state finance commissions with the additional charge, but that commission was only of 2 members, including me, the chairman and the member secretary. Chairman was a retired IAS officer who worked in the urban local bodies, Panchayati Raj, and the finance department. He remained the secretaries of all the 3 departments in Haryana. So it was a great learning for me about knowing the details of ULBs and the Panchayati Raj institutions as well as state finances. But many challenges which we faced as a commission, in that phase I will like to tell about that. And those are the things which have been discussed by particularly in NIFP's report. But we felt it like, and what we tried to do with those challenges. First and foremost, which is recommended by the many state finance commissions again and again, that the state finance commissions must have a permanent secretariat sort of thing. So in Haryana and most of the states, it's like that a state finance commission is notified by the FD or some GAD, and then it works for 1 year, 2 years, then the whole setup is finished because it is staffed by the temporary staff or staff loaned from the other departments. And when the new finance commission comes, state finance commission, even he has to find out the space for the office also. Office, furniture, and the secretarial staff. So generally 3 to 4 months, 5 months, they go into this to just set up the office. So there is a need of permanent secretariat or some sort of a permanent cell for the state finance commissions to make them more effective. Then the biggest challenge, which is the biggest, is the data available to the state finance commissions to make their recommendations. As sir has mentioned, most of the states, they don't have good quality of primary data or the secondary data source related with the PRIs or the ULBs. I can say about my state. So even the budget documents of the ULBs are not authentic. You will find a lot of variations. And then every municipality is following its own account codes because like my state has not implemented the NAM till date. So there are issues with accounting, but the data is the biggest challenge. And for its, so how to define the revenue expenditure, capital expenditure, how to categorize it, how, like what are the revenue streams available for the ULBs. So it has been a constant source of challenge. So we spent a lot of time on gathering that data as well as finding out the accuracy of that, that how much we can rely, what is the confidence level in that data. One thing which we tried to address is, apart from revenue, which was much easier to find out, that yes, at least we can take the data from the bank accounts of the municipalities or the Panchayati Raj. But once you start working on the devolution, then you have to see what is the earning capacity of that ULB, and as well as what is the money required to provide the basic minimum services for that ULB. So revenue is one thing, but how to define the expenditure? Because they are going to spend only what they have. So how will you come out with a normative expenditure that this much of money is required for ULB to deliver basic services of sanitation, maintenance of street lights, maintenance of parks, maintenance of the cremation grounds, community centers. I'm not talking about the development on the sewage or the water supply or on the streets. So we came out with we collected data from the various municipalities and came out with a that this much of normative expenditure per capita is required to maintain the basic minimum level of services. And then we find out the resource gap, that what is the resource gap for that municipality for the revenue they are getting and the normative expenditure which is required. Then again we calculated the normative revenue also. keeping in view the, after analyzing all 88 ULBs, and then accordingly we made a recommendation for the devolution to the state. But this is the biggest challenge for any SFC about the data, that the reliability and accuracy and the frequency of the data. Then one minor thing is like, which has happened in the many states also, although Haryana has constituted 6 state finance commissions, but that is not a fixed, like the notification is as per the willingness of the state. So we have 3 finance or 4 state finance commissions in certain states. In certain states there are 6, or I don't know whether 7th has also been notified yet or not. But one challenge with the notification, and that is with the Haryana also, that the generally, like in, and this has happened in case of all the 6 state finance commissions in Haryana, that they were notified once the period of devolution has already been started. Like, so for 6 state finance commission, it was to make recommendation from financial year 21 to 26, and it was notified in September 21. So 1 year has already been lapsed by the time we started working on that. So there is a need of timely notification, and then the time given to that finance commission for finalizing its recommendations. So generally, like Central Finance Commission, it's very well structured and followed diligently. But in states, there is no time limit. Certain state finance commissions have taken 4 years to 5 years to finalize its reports. Certain finance commissions have completed it in 1 year or 2 years. So I don't know, like my seniors are here. So there has to be some prescription that by this date, it has to be notified, and minimum time period should be given along with the maximum time period. Other part is seriousness for the recommendations which are made by the Finance Commission. Certain states take it diligently. In certain states, no action taken report is placed in the state legislative assembly. Even there are certain instances, and in my state also, when the recommendations were accepted but not implemented. So if there was a devolution of 5% or 7%, so state keeping in view its requirement or the scenario at that time has not devolved. So even after acceptance of recommendation, there is a little bit lack of seriousness on sanctity of those recommendations. One intervention which I will like to share, apart from that, the revenue and expenditure, which normative expenditure we calculated for the ULBs, state of Haryana has assigned a unique ID to each and every family of the state, which we call family ID. And it is a database of, we have certain socio-economic fields, data fields which we are collecting. It's around 32 fields which, the data of which we collect from the citizens. It's an voluntary thing, but it has addressed a problem of timely and accurate data to large extent. So we collect at least, we didn't have a census after 2011. But I can claim with a fair degree of accuracy that the population data which we have, it's around 2.83 crore people are enrolled in the FIDR in the state of Haryana, and by and large it goes with the population, estimated population projections from the census. We calculate the income also from the FIDR. So we have a, like demographic data in FIDR, and state has mandatorily created a property ID for the properties in the municipalities. So I have, like I can tell you, like to large, again with the accuracy to the large extent, that we have quite a fairly idea of what are there in this, in terms of properties in the urban local bodies or the municipalities of Haryana. So we have 47 lakh properties in Haryana. So by superimposing these two databases, I know I have fairly accurate idea of what type of activities are taking place in certain municipalities, what type of revenue which municipalities are generating, and what type of income people are having in that particular area. So we are able to devise schemes based on these two databases, and I am like confident that this database will be quite useful for the future finance commissions of Haryana. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta, and it shows the importance of having the right data to make the decisions on devolution, which will help improve, SFC's recommendations even getting approved and implemented, and the gaps, even though it's a constitutional requirement on the implementation, is also probably discussed by him. And now may I request Dr. Sreedevi to share her views.
Thank you very much. I'm grateful to be part of this panel where we have stalwarts present here about talking about the Central Finance Commission and the State Finance Commission and their role. But I think if I have to comment on those functioning of the Finance Commission, I think I'm not the appropriate person. But as a recipient of the prescriptions of the Finance Commission, as Commissioner and Director of Municipal Administration, I had certain observations which I would like to just present. One thing which I feel is a council is at the helm. The municipal council is at the helm when works regarding their own revenues are concerned. So this is where the perspective is like it is the real local self-government if the revenues are your own. And what are those revenues? They are the property tax. And sir has just mentioned what is the contribution of the property tax vis-a-vis the GDP. If that is if the local self-government has to decide, then we are not at all into this democratic decentralization. So what are the other taxes or revenues that the local bodies have? If you look at the entertainment tax, sorry to say now entertainment tax is subsumed into GST. There is no role unless it is devolved from the center, there is no amount, funds are not flowing. And if it is about the earlier, the professional tax is collected by the commercial taxes department and it is shared with the local bodies. Same is the case with the stamp duty. It is collected by the registration department, the government, and then it is given as a grant or the budgetary support. In fact, in the previous discussion, we were talking about local bodies being parasitic on grants. It is not grants, those are actually the rights of the local bodies with regard to the stamp duty. But that is not what is happening. So are we looking at State Finance Commission or Central Finance Commission trying to recognize the place of the local bodies and local self-government, the third tier of the governance, and give it its rightful place so that it can stand for itself and also function. Sir, and one more thing I wanted to tell is we have in Telangana given drinking water supply to all households. But for the plans that we have in place, this is not going to be possible, sir. When you commented whether we have plans at all, definitely I would like to take that we have the plans for the development, because we were talking about the fringe villages or the peri-urban centers that actually have the same kind of urbanization in terms of density, but they don't get the same kind of provisions of urban local body. So here we have actually recognized those, and Tamil Nadu is a stalwart in that where they have the Nagar Panchayats, the largest number of Nagar Panchayats. We went a little ahead and then recognized them as the urban local bodies. We have conducted elections to all 142 urban local bodies, and there are councils in place. But are these councils are able to function? We are talking about the devolution of 3 Fs. Are we able to actually allow them to function the way they are supposed to? For example, in Telangana, we do not have health and education under the purview of the local self-government. It is again in the government. But because of the funds, devolution of funds not happening in a way, giving flexibility or freedom to the local bodies, in fact, the parastatals have become much more important. The second thing is now we were talking about the water board. Metro Waterworks Board is another organization which is overseeing the distribution of water amongst municipalities. So that is going to be the cess or the charge is going to go to the board. So there are a lot of issues where the urban local body if it has to stand on its own finances and also compete in the market, are we giving the urban local body the kind of space that is required so that they can garner that kind of a financial strength to stand and issue a municipal bond? This is $1 million question that we should be questioning ourselves. So I feel that the SFC or the CFC are the mechanisms or instruments given by the Constitution to show or recognize the space that urban local bodies should have in governance. So I feel that conditions being imposed are actually curtailing the freedom of the urban local bodies. So I would plead that when the officers or the finance commissions, when they are constituted, they should look at this. Our constitution basically looks at the third tier as being strengthened. Are these mechanisms strengthening, or are they taking away the powers? In the name of municipal financing, are we again taking back the powers of the council or the local bodies from deciding what they want to do? When you are talking about pool financing that came in the previous discussion, you want the municipalities to become like satellites and access funds from the market. If you are going to do, who is going to decide where it is going to be implemented, which projects is going to be implemented? Is the council which is deciding, or it is somebody else which is deciding? So these are the issues which I think that we should put it in place, and this is going to be actually the mandate for the State Finance Commission or the Central Finance Commission to provide the space that is required for a proper devolution of 3Fs. And sir, as rightly mentioned, facilitating is the role of the public servant. I think that is where we have to leave the councils to be able to generate their own plans for their works, or develop plans for fulfilling the services that are required in the local, both rural and urban areas, and then be able to do so. I think these are the mechanisms that the Constitution has given in Finance Commission, and the recommendations will definitely aid and help the local bodies to do whatever they are mandated to. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was a great intervention from the perspective from the other side of the table as a user department. There's a constitutional intent to transfer functions and funds, but there is some kind of a counter movement based on practicality and management, what have you, which makes parastatals do certain functions and not and say that we are waiting for state capacity to develop for these functions to be transferred. Then there's again a question of certain taxes being collected for ease or convenience by somebody, and assignments. Even those assignments might not be given in full, which will lead to a shortage of funds with the third tier. All these are very valid issues, but which one to tackle first? Are you waiting for capacities to develop to transfer the functions, or are you doing the functions? Sometimes, as Dr. Lahiri put it, is it something whose time has not come? It is far in advance of its times that you did the 74th Amendment, and you're still trying for the capacities to catch up. So whichever way you look at it, we've got to come to a golden mean which will address both sides of this divide. But it's been an excellent debate from various perspectives, and now I would leave the last word from all the panelists as to what they think are practical next steps which could be done, where Janaagraha and other civil society organizations can also participate to improve the, at the end of the day, all of that is done for a particular reason, to make the life of the urban dweller better. How are we going to achieve it? I would leave the last word to the, and can we go in reverse order now? I would start with, okay, we'll start with Mr. Vijayanand, because he has a flight to catch.
Sorry for butting in only one point. Do we wait for capacity, or do we give? History, experience shows that capacity cannot be created in a vacuum. You learn by doing. If British had waited for Indian capacity to develop, we would never have got freedom even now. So trust, leap in the dark, but experience shows wherever you trust, it is better capacity is earned. Thank you. I need to leave before the traffic starts at 5. So to the airport. Sorry for doing this.
There are 3 questions that I will address. One is concurrence and conditionality. These two, I am bringing in concurrence. Again, the founding fathers, I think I continue to be a great admirer. If you look at the 3 lists, list 1, list 2, list 3, The union government has got powers to do. The residual power is they can intervene in anything. Since we are talking about supply-led reform and demand-led reform, such a large country with so many states, there will be issues of underdevelopment in certain states which Haryana, Tamil Nadu or Kerala may not need, but another state needs it. I think concurrence we have to live with for some time. Similarly, states will find, though they may devolve the powers to a local body, in certain areas they will have to have the residual power to intervene. The same is with conditionality. You know, having lived in Bharat, I've seen the power of one. If in one of my constituency parts, had there been one person who would have looked at the schedule of works, how much is supposed to be spent, what is the thickness of the road that needs to be built, the road would have been built in a better way. So we need to have residuary powers and conditionalities imposed by the state and by the union. It's a matter of judgment. I completely agree with Mr. Vijayanand. We'll have to go ahead of our times, give more powers, but have some conditionalities. Look at Swachh Bharat. If we had left it to the rural local bodies to have Swachh Bharat, I don't think the focus would have been as much. So we need to have some conditionalities, but again, your judgment is as good as mine, and we have to come to a proper golden mean that we don't overdo it. Data, I'm fully aware of the fact that data doesn't exist, but like you buying a lot of books and keeping it in your room, but not reading them, in India having done some work in empirical economics, there are plenty of data which are collected but not used. I would suggest that there should be a meeting of the state finance commissions whenever the Union Finance Commission has been constituted, and they voice what is the data that we need, and that should become a demand-led supply of data. And I think we can do better. Rather than leaving some agency to collect data and then we find that we're not using it, that will be the best thing. And now last, my dream. See, after independence, we built some new cities like Bhubaneswar, Chandigarh, Raipur. Now I find no new cities are being built. We will need new cities because rebuilding an old city is extremely difficult. You go to the old parts of Gurgaon, if I tell you that reform it, it's impossible. It's easier, it's cheaper to build a state-of-the-art city. So I would urge, and the 15th Finance Commission I noticed had a proposal that states will compete with each other for new cities. I haven't read anything in the newspapers about any state coming up and saying, we'll build a new city. MOU. But I haven't seen people rushing to say, we'll build a new city. We will need new cities for our children and grandchildren. Otherwise, we'll die in unplanned urbanization. Thank you. You plan on catching a flight? You came in the morning and you were yesterday. See you soon. We'll stay in touch.
I think Mr. Krishnan, a quick word from Krishnan.
I think, I agree with a lot of what has been said. And the most important thing is it's important to trust and make that leap. And even states which have done it haven't regretted it. They just need to do it more. And definitely capacity grows. The quality of urban or rural public representatives has continuously improved. And I can assure you that my experience definitely shows that when you actually have public representatives in place, both at the local level and at higher levels, and they are reasonably empowered, the outcomes in terms of development and governance are significantly better. And we have any number of test cases to establish this. I've seen it through my career. We've had delayed elections in Tamil Nadu in the recent past, and many of my colleagues felt it would have been far better to have had local body representatives alongside for improving the quality of delivery of services. So we really need to place faith in them, and the funds will really follow as more functions, should really follow as more functions happen, or even if the funds are already there, if more functions are given, they would be able to deliver significantly better services.
Thank you very much. Mr. Shah, I think we are out of time, so probably I'm sorry, but thank you very much for a patient hearing, and thank you for the panel for an engrossing discussion. Thank you.